morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Welcome to the PVP Weekly Press Conference. With me is the GS as usual. You'll be reading three statements, after which we'll take your questions. Yes?
Yes, the first statement reads as follows. The Central Committee of the People's Progressive Party met on Saturday, February 27, 2016. The party analyzed developments in the country since the APNU-AFC was catapulted to office and concluded that the Granger-led administration has failed miserably to deliver on its election promises. The so-called good life promised to the people is turning out to be a mirage, and except for the top echelons of the ruling cabal, the vast majority of the population are worse off than before the change of administration. The Central Committee also condemned the attempts of the regime to intimidate party members on trumped-up charges and express solidarity with all those who are being victimized, one way or another, by the administration due to their party affiliation. The party noted with concern the decision to close down the Wales sugar factory and the hardships that decision would have on the well-being of those who depended on the estate for their living. The failure of the administration to secure markets for rice was also noted by the party. Much deliberation took place on the upcoming local government elections and the preparedness of the party to win an overwhelming majority of the constituencies at the mayoral and NDC levels. The PPP is optimistic that the electorate will turn out in their numbers and vote overwhelmingly for the PVP-C. The party also heard presentation by the General Secretary, which set the tone for a robust discussion on the way forward for the party in its effort to regain political power. In this regard, the party was encouraged with the court rulings with respect to its elections petition and the status of two government ministers, which hangs in the balance, allowing them to sit on borrowed time in the National Assembly. The party reaffirmed its resolve to fight relentlessly to defend the economic and social gains made by the PVP-C administration. Every attempt will also be made to sensitize the international community on the erosion of the democratic and fundamental rights of the Guyanese people, which appear to be under threat, with the increasing militarization of the state apparatus. The Central Committee endorsed a recommendation by the Executive Committee to fill two vacancies in that body, with Comrades Indra Chandapal and Anil Nandalal serving now as members of the Executive Committee. The next statement reads as follows. The People's Progressive Party is fully prepared for the advance voting by members of the disciplined forces on March 8, 2016. However, the party is yet to receive the list of the members of the disciplined forces, which was promised to be delivered on February 19, 2016. This commitment was made by GCOM's chairman, Dr. C. Bali, at the meeting held with the Commission on February 9, 2016, with the PPP delegation. It is now 10 days since this commitment was given to the party, yet the commitment has not been fulfilled. This delay raises once again questions with respect to transparency and efficiency of GCOM, who is responsible for supervising and conducting free and fair elections in Guyana. The non-provision of the list of voters, of members of the disciplined forces, will make it difficult for the party to carry out the necessary checks and verification prior to March the 8th in those local authority areas where PVP-C candidates will be contesting. The PVP wishes to remind that deprivation of these lists only serve to undermine confidence in the electoral process and can, in the final analysis, bring into question the credibility of the results of the elections. The party also wishes to reiterate its concerns with respect to assurance given to have representatives of the party accompany the ballot boxes to the place of storage and other logistical arrangements. In this regard, the party calls on GCOM to invite all contesting parties, individuals and groups, to a comprehensive briefing with GCOM officials where information will be provided with respect to the logistical and other arrangements related to the elections on March the 8th and 18th, respectively. A date and time for such a meeting needs to be decided on quickly and communicated immediately to the parties, individuals, and groups. The party again raises its concerns and reservations in respect to persons without ID cards being allowed to vote at these elections and insists that GCOM should discourage persons from voting without ID cards. There appears to be a contradiction between what the law allows and what has been the practice. It makes absolutely no sense for a person to have been denied an ID card because he or she had no source document, particularly a birth certificate, and at the end of the day, having been subjected to the royal runaround only to be told that the ID card is not necessary by law to allow the elector to cast his or her vote. The party repeats that this loose arrangement can be the subject of abuse by persons who seek to subvert the democratic process in their favor. In this regard, underage persons and persons having fictitious names can turn up at a ballot or polling station and demand that they cast their vote without an ID card or any other form of identification. Finally, the party raises its concerns once again with respect to the use of private residences as ballot or polling stations for March the 8th and the 18th. Apart from the private residence factor, the distance between places of residence and the locations themselves are of concern to the PPP. The three above concerns, namely absence of the list of voters, non-use of ID cards, and use of private residences, when combined, can and will result in fraudulent elections being perpetrated against the will of the Guyanese electorate. The PPP is on public record as regards its concerns and reservations in these areas. However, what should be of interest to all Guyanese is the APNU-AFC's uncanny silence in respect to any matter concerning the upcoming local government elections. Their silence, by its very nature, raises the suspicion that the APNU-AFC apparently do not have to air any concern nor make any representation to GCOM on matters of concern to it, since whatever concerns and reservations they may have is being addressed internally by staff at GCOM favorable to the APNU-AFC. The last statement reads as follows. The People Progressive Party has been following with deep interest the mounting criticisms which the Granger-led coalition administration has been facing in light of its reluctance to release the final report of the Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry. The severe criticism of the Granger administration has also come about due to President Granger's unstatesmanlike rejection of the report's conclusions and recommendations. The PBP views the mounting criticisms of the APNU-AFC coalition administration as justified and fully supports the call for the immediate release of the report and for it to be laid in the National Assembly unconditionally. The PNC has always been viewed as the main culprit responsible for the assassination of Dr. Walter Rodney. Withholding the report will not exonerate Granger's party from culpability of this heinous crime. In fact, withholding the report has had exactly the opposite effect, which the PNC may not have contemplated. That is, a barrage of criticisms and demands from several quarters to release the report. Now, there are two attempts at covering up. First, the attempt to cover up who is responsible for the death of Dr. Rodney, and second, the attempt at covering up the findings of the report detailing the circumstances of Dr. Rodney's assassination. One cover-up seeks to cover up the other in a brazen attempt to hide the truth from the Guyanese people. These efforts reveal how a government will resort to petty, unstatesmanlike, and dishonorable behavior simply to protect his hero and his contemporary underlings from public scrutiny. Every Guyanese knows that the PNC never wanted a commission of inquiry into the death of Dr. Rodney. To justify their opposition to the commission of inquiry, they picked one specific paragraph 4 of the terms of reference of the commission of inquiry, which they described as, quote, tendentious, malicious, and incongruous with terms of reference 1, and which paragraph 4 of the TOR reads as follows, quote, to examine and report on the actions and activities of the state, such as the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Defense Force, the Guyana National Service, the Guyana People's Militia, and those who were in command and superintendence of these agencies to determine whether they were tasked with the surveillance of and carrying out of actions, and whether they did execute those tasks and carried out those actions against the political opposition for the period 1st January 1978 to 31st December 1980, end of quote. In retrospect, it is not surprising why this particular paragraph was chosen, especially when account is taken of what obtains today in respect of the makeup of the presidency, the Ministry of State, and the retinue of ex-military officers who now constitute the bulwark of the inner sanctum of the Granger-led coalition administration. Moreover, it would come as no surprise were the nation to be told that just as the soldiers who shot to death Jagan Ramisar and Bolnat Parmalan, quote-unquote, acted admirably in 1973 under quarantine, in the same way the assassins acted in snuffing out the life of prominent Guyanese historian and political leader. But the one fundamental difference in these two despicable acts is the fact that the Danjapan report of the commission inquiry into the shooting to death of the two young men was published, while the report of the commission inquiry into the assassination of Dr. Walter Rodney remains locked down by the PNC for fear that it would expose their cloven hoofs. The shame is more than that can be borne, that a black-dominated reactionary regime killed a black progressive intellectual. The PBP urges the Granger Coalition administration to put an end to this nonsensical behavior, which will only end in disaster. President Granger should heed the wise words of Benjamin Franklin, who wrote that it should not be supposed that honor and dignity are better served, quote, by persisting in a wrong measure once entered into than by rectifying an error as soon as it has been discovered, end of quote. Thank you.
There you had the three statements. Questions?
And when I respond, sir, I know this former Speaker of the National Assembly on the PPP side, Raj Rampuran, came out in support of the decision to waive to put a policy of execution in the parliamentary thing, and he cited laws which suggested that what happened in this case to appoint Scott and Felix was happening before. I don't know if you read it, but what would be your reaction?
No, I haven't read it. What do you mean by what happened before?
He's saying that there was precedent.
Uh-huh.
He's also
For stays of execution?
No. For appointing people from whatever list there was.
Oh.
He's also arguing that the people on those lists aren't elected members until they're selected to parliament. They're just members of the list.
Okay. Well, he described it, I think, from what I read, from reading the headline at least. I didn't go along to read the substance of the article that he wrote. He described that as a constitutional conundrum. Well, constitutional conundrums, as far as I'm concerned, have to be resolved in the Constitutional Court. And that's where it is, I believe, now. So I think the public at large and the PPP in particular would be watching and waiting to see how the court will resolve this matter. The former Attorney General, Mr. Nandalal, will continue to represent Mr. Murian in this matter. And if Mr. Ramkuran wants to play the role of defense counsel on the part of the other two MPs, well, then probably he should, put on his senior counsel gown and go to court and defend whatever arguments he has to. But I would want to pronounce on this matter at this point in time.
Next.
Eddie Rodney-Mera. Mr. General Secretary, you're raising your concerns, your three main concerns with the Local Government Elections.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, you did raise the concern of proxy voting, but you didn't mention this time. Has that properly been cleared up? That's one. Secondly, I've had a look at some of the places or venues or areas where you come to have voting taking place. And it would seem to me as if it's predominantly offices, RDCs. Is this possible under the present arrangement? The RDCs are supposed to be disbanded. And if they're disbanded, the offices are supposed to be closed. Can you use an RDC office for people to go and vote?
On the question of whether the question of the proxy issue has been settled to the satisfaction of the PPP, the answer is no, not fully. We are still waiting for a reply from GCOM. We sent our letter to the chairman. He referred our letter to the CEO and advised me in a correspondence acknowledging my letter that he has asked the CEO to respond to the issues that I have raised to him, and then he will send it to me. So the proxy matter, in addition to these matters that I mentioned, remain areas where we have concerns and reservations. In respect of the RDC offices being used as polling stations, well, we still have some concerns about venues for polling stations. Right now, I think there are about 241 places that are private residences that are listed for use as polling places, which we are not happy with. and the RDC officers may be, I'm emphasizing the word maybe, because they are government, related. That is the decision that they've taken. And then there may be cases also where they couldn't find a place, and rather than taking a private residence, they decided to take that. But these are all questions that we'll have to clear up prior to the voting on March the 18th.
Clarifying question is, the former president made statements to the effect that the PPP could withstand any COI into its years in government.
Into what?
That the PPP could withstand any COI into
Uh-huh.
its years in government.
Into its years in government?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Is this statement something that you endorse or support? Do you stand as one on this?
I haven't read fully the statement, but I could say without fear of contradiction that yes, as a member of the People Progressive Party leadership, as a former member of cabinet and government minister for the entire 23 years, I believe that that's a solid statement. I have no reason to doubt whatever may have been said in it.
Sir, Mr. Granger's objection to the Rodney COI is that it was biased, that it had people who were on the spot. I think he was referring to Skip Roberts. And it chose not to use him, but instead to go for hearsay evidence. What is your objection to his criticism of the report on the grounds of bias?
I think it's totally without foundation. I think he's fishing for some kind of excuse, all of which are being demolished by persons who have been writing letters and making statements. For example, on the question of hearsay, I read a piece written by Mr. Nandalal, which I was very impressed with what he said about the use of hearsay evidence in a commission of inquiry versus a court of law. And he cited cited case laws where distinguished judges in Commonwealth jurisdictions pronounced on this matter. So I think that Mr. Nandalal wrote very authoritatively and convincingly, in my view, on that particular subject. Obviously, the president is not a lawyer, and if he has lawyers with him, they're wrongly advising him about the use of hearsay in a court, in a commission of inquiry versus a court of law. That's number one. Number two, the question of bias. Well, I think the APNU, AFC, and the PNC started out from a position of bias in respect to the commission of inquiry. Their position from the inception is that the commission of inquiry is wrongly conceived, and they were harping continuously on the question of the TURs and the composition, that it was biased. Well, obviously, if you don't want something to be done, you have to find excuses. And those are the three premises they jumped on to justify, quote unquote, their position as to why the COI should not be held. I refer to, for example, the paragraph 4 in the TUR for which they were objecting. And then in respect to the composition, the lawyer from Trinidad and Tobago was the one who they were strenuously objecting to. They even made some initial objections to Mr. Cheltenham, claiming that he participated in things before and he made pronouncement before on the Rodney issue and things and so forth. So, and then at the beginning they said they weren't going to participate in it, and then Bassett Williams eventually changed the position at the press conference, said they're not going to cooperate. Then there's a difference between participation and cooperation. That's what he was saying. But they nevertheless turned up at the COI and were asking questions, etc., etc. So I believe that the president's position in respect to the findings of the COI, in respect of it being flawed and so forth, is hogwash, to put it rather bluntly. Publish the document so that the people of Guyana could pronounce on it, rather than pronouncing on a report that has been leaked, which appears to be authentic. We haven't seen a copy as yet. We're following what is happening in the press, what is reflected in the media. But as a political party, we want to receive an official copy of the report so that we could go through it thoroughly, examine it in great detail, and apart from the pronouncement which we just made, which is a kind of an initial response, we would like to examine it carefully because we have an interest in it too. So that's why we are pressing the government to release the report. It's nonsense to keep this report hawking it up as though it belongs to them. It doesn't belong to them. It was paid for by taxpayers' money. They themselves have admitted so much money has been spent on it. So if so much money has been spent on it, it's the people's money, release it to the people. I think it was Impelborg Humperdinck who sang, "Please release me." So they should release the document. Let the people a lot of wider coverage, more authoritative pronouncement be made on it, and probably scholars in other parts of the world, Mrs. Rodney herself had never received a copy. I doubt it. So that would be my response to the President's, pronouncement so far on this matter.
Sir, but it's hard to believe that the party hasn't seen a document when former Attorney General Anil Nandlal has a copy.
Well, I don't know. He never told me he has a copy. He has never told me he has a copy.
Yes, yes, sir.
On the same issue, Mr. Diaz, the whole question of the water, there are other stakeholders which haven't come to the fore yet. For example, the Secretariat. I've been made to understand, and I think other persons as well, that there's been a question of the remuneration of the lawyers, Animan, and even the staff. Are you in a position to throw any light on that?
Well, I didn't hear much about the local staff, but I heard Sir Richard made some pronouncement about a fee, a writing up fee, in addition to the money that was due to them as commissioners. There is an additional fee which is part of the arrangement which is due to them for writing up the report. They have not heard anything about that writing up fee as yet. So that is something, and then the local lawyers, of course, will have to make their voices heard. I forgot to mention, Adam, the point that you raised about people being here and not being called. Well, the argument has been made in a very convincing way that the government can't have its cake and eat it. They truncated the COI's full length of existence, determined that they're not going to fund it any further. When the Commission was already saying publicly that will impact negatively on the results of their work. We were told that Skip Roberts was in the country, but the man was sitting here waiting when an announcement was already made that the COI was truncated. From the reports that I've read, I don't know what you know, Adam, but I'm saying from the reports that I have read, I haven't spoken to Skip Roberts, and I haven't spoken to the commissioners, but gleaning from the newspaper reports, I gather that Skip Roberts was in the country and was either prepared or not, or advised not to go to the COI. Which is the truth, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, he never did appear in front of the COI, even though he was, invited or summoned to appear before the COI. Norman MacLean was supposed to have a second appearance before the COI. I saw a letter where Hamilton Green wrote to the Commission saying that he knows nothing about the assassination of Walter Rodney. He was not involved, and therefore he's not available to present any evidence before the COI. I see a lot of people writing and talking now from the WPA who chose not to appear before the COI. For example, Mr. David Hines. He had all the time in the world to go before the COI, but suddenly he's talking now. Rupert Roopnaraine had all the time in the world to go before the COI. He didn't either. Trotman didn't go before the COI. So it appears as though within the WPA there are internal contradictions on this matter. Well, we've seen Takuma Ogunsaye pronounce on the findings. He was there all the time, and he did give some evidence. And so the fact of the matter is, unless the report is published in toto, we would not be able to get more authoritative views on the contents of the report. Yes.
Susan Baker again, thanks. Didn't we decide whether they're going to challenge the bill that was passed without a majority?
Yes, I heard some initial comments on it. I can't say definitively whether that will be the case, but from what I've heard, it appears that that will be so.
And secondly, with the concern about the extracurricular activities of a cop by the name of Mr. Caesar,
Of who?
a cop by the name of Mr. Caesar,
A cop?
the Assistant Superintendent Police.
Oh, I see. Uh-huh.
The party also claimed that they have tapes with recordings. Would that be released to the public?
If it will be released to the public. I think there was a person by name of Travis Chase who was asked to release what he has, if I could recall. But I was made to understand that he made it public, that as a journalist he was not prepared to release such information for fear that it might disclose his sources. Well, I suppose the same position stands in respect of ourselves.
Any other question? If not, thanks, ladies and gentlemen.